School, where you're supposed to worry about pop quizzes, last-minute homework, and whether you remembered your locker combination. But sometimes, it becomes the setting for the kind of stories you'd never believe if they weren't 100% real. From teachers losing control to students making headlines, and incidents that shook entire communities, Reddit is full of jaw-dropping true accounts from people who lived through them. Think your school had its fair share of crazy moments? Wait until you hear these stories. And to kick things off, imagine a school counselor that students whisper about, warning each other to never be alone with him. For years, nothing happened, until one day, his darkest secret was exposed, and the whole school realized what had been lurking right under their noses. If you love crazy real-life stories like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Reddit True Vault for more insane Reddit tales. Story 1. The shocking secret of a coach. I never thought I'd be the girl caught in the middle of a scandal that shattered a school's image. But life has a twisted sense of humor, and sometimes, the truth is uglier than any rumor. Coach Marshall was the golden boy of our school. He was charming, athletic, and had this effortless way of making everyone like him, even the kids who hated Jim. And for some reason, he seemed to like me more than the rest. The lingering eye contact, the casual touches on my shoulder, the compliments that were just barely appropriate. But I was 18, naive, and honestly, I felt special until I wasn't. The rumors started small, whispers in the locker room, passing comments in the hallway. I ignored them until one night, reality hit me like a truck. It was after practice, and I had left my hoodie in Coach's office. When I went back to grab it, I saw another girl sitting at his desk. She was leaning in, laughing at something on his phone. At first, I thought maybe it was just innocent, until she turned, and I saw the way he looked at her, the exact same way he used to look at me. My stomach dropped. My skin turned cold. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, but suddenly, it all made sense. The way he always picked certain girls for extra training, the late-night texts, the rides home that were never just about being nice. I wasn't special. I was just one of many. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, Ryan, my ex, found out. I don't know who told him. Maybe it was the rumors. Maybe someone sent him proof. But one afternoon, I saw him waiting in the parking lot. His fists were clenched, his jaw was set, and before I could even process what was happening, boom, the punch landed straight into Coach's face. He staggered back, stunned, before he fought back. The school parking lot turned into a full-blown street fight. Students screamed, some ran for help, and of course, others whipped out their phones to record. The fight was ugly. Blood, yelling, chaos. By the time security broke it up, Coach's face was busted open, and Ryan was being dragged away by the cops. The next morning, an official announcement was made. Coach Marshall had resigned for personal reasons. Yeah, sure. Looking back, I don't know who won that fight. But I know for sure who lost. Coach Marshall, his career, and whatever sick game he thought he was playing. Scandals like this don't just come from teachers. Sometimes, students bring the biggest shocks of all. Story number 2. The Underground Fight Club of 5th graders. Speaking of shocking school incidents, let me tell you about something that happened when I was in 5th grade. My name's Danny, and back then, I went to an elementary school where recess was supposed to be a time for harmless fun. But somehow, we managed to turn it into something out of a WWE event. And trust me, it did not end well. When you're 10 years old, your idea of danger is usually something like sneaking extra cookies before dinner or riding your bike down a hill a little too fast. For us, it was starting an underground fight club because, that sounded like a great idea at the time. It all started as a joke. Someone had pushed their friend during recess, he pushed back, and before we knew it, a crowd had gathered, cheering them on like it was a pay-per-view event. No one really got hurt, and honestly, it was kinda thrilling. That was the moment the 5th grade fight club was born. At first, it was just harmless wrestling. Pushing, shoving, light grappling, nothing serious. But then, someone had the bright idea of using the plastic playground borders to create a makeshift ring. Now, it looked official, and official things need rules, right? No hitting in the face. We weren't savages. No hair pulling. We weren't girls. Our 10-year-old brains thought this was a legitimate rule. First one to tap out loses. Simple. Fun. No harm done. Until there was. With the stakes rising, so did the intensity. Boys started training at home, learning moves from WWE, and suddenly, our friendly little matches turned into full-blown body slams on the hard dirt. The first injury was a sprained wrist. We laughed it off. The second? A broken arm. Then came the worst one. Our friend Elliot got suplexed headfirst into the ground. He didn't get up. The crowd went silent. Someone poked him. Nothing. Then, finally, he groaned and tried to sit up, only to wobble like a newborn deer and fall back down. Concussion. That's when we knew we were screwed. The teachers stormed the playground when they saw us carrying Elliot toward the nurse's office. Within minutes, our beloved fight club was exposed. Parents were called, punishments were handed out, and recess was never the same again. To this day, we still talk about it. Dude, remember when we basically had our own illegal UFC? Yeah. And remember how we almost killed Elliot? Yeah. Maybe not our brightest moment. Some games get out of control, but sometimes the chaos comes from where you least expect it, like a heated argument in class turning into something way worse. Story number 3. The Price of Talking Back to a Teacher, narrated by Robert. There's always that one kid in every school. The one who just does not care. The one who treats teachers like enemies, rules like a joke, and authority like a personal challenge. At my school, that kid was Zach. Zach had been a walking suspension notice since middle school. If there was a fight, he was in it. If there was a detention slip being handed out, it had his name on it. But the one thing he loved more than anything? Arguing with teachers, and not just arguing, humiliating them. He had this way of pushing people's buttons just right to make them explode. And then, he'd sit back and smirk while they lost their cool. It was his personal sport. But one day, Zach picked the wrong opponent. Our history teacher, Mr. Lawson, was an ex-Marine. Built like a brick wall, voiced like a drill sergeant, and absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. If you stepped out of line in his class, you'd better be ready for war. So, of course, Zach decided that was his next challenge. It started as the usual back and forth. Zach muttering sarcastic remarks, Mr. Lawson firing back with stone-cold comebacks. But then, Zach pushed too far. He made some crude remark about the teacher's wife. Silence. For the first time, Mr. Lawson didn't respond. He just pointed to the door. Out. Zach grinned, thinking he'd won. But instead of just walking out like a normal person, he climbed onto his desk. Everyone froze. Zach unzipped his pants. No way, I thought. He's not actually going to. Oh, but he did. Right there. In the middle of class. In broad daylight. I will never, in my entire life, forget the absolute horror on Mr. Lawson's face. Or the collective scream of, dude, what the F asterisk, from the entire class. And then, absolute chaos. People jumping out of their seats, knocking over chairs, someone ran out of the room screaming, and one poor girl started gagging. Mr. Lawson? He didn't even yell. He just walked out, like he was done with life. Zach was dragged out of the school within the hour. Suspended? Oh no, expelled. His parents pulled him out completely, and no one ever saw him again. Last I heard, he dropped out of high school entirely. And to this day, whenever someone does something dumb, we say, at least it wasn't as bad as the Zach incident. Sometimes, the biggest changes don't come from punishments, but from realizing you've been holding yourself back all along. Story 4. The unexpected transformation of a rebellious student that I used to hate Will. Not in the I hope he disappears kind of way, but more like the I don't understand why he's like that way. Will was the guy in our class who always dressed in all black, wore heavy boots even in summer, and had this air of complete indifference toward everyone. He never talked unless forced to, sat alone at lunch, and when teachers called on him, he answered in the most deadpan, sarcastic way possible. If someone tried to be friendly, he would either ignore them or shut them down with a cold stare. He wasn't a bully, but he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the rest of us. Then it happened. One morning, the entire school was buzzing. There had been a national tragedy, one so shocking that it was the only thing people could talk about. Teachers looked shaken, parents showed up at school to check on their kids, and security was tightened overnight. No one knew how to process it. But the biggest shock for me was seeing Will walk into school, looking completely different. He wasn't wearing his usual long black coat. His dyed black hair was back to its natural color. The dark makeup around his eyes was gone. And for the first time since I had known him, he actually looked approachable. It was jarring. People whispered about it all day. Some joked that he was undercover, others thought he lost a bet. But when someone finally asked him why, his answer silenced everyone. I didn't want to be mistaken for them. That was it. No further explanation. Just that one simple sentence. In the following weeks, something strange happened. Will started talking to people. It wasn't sudden. He didn't become the life of the party overnight. But he stopped brushing people off. He actually joined group discussions in class. He even laughed at a joke once. and I swear the entire room turned to look at him in disbelief. By the end of the year, Will wasn't just that weird kid in black. He was still reserved, still had his sarcastic remarks, but he had friends now. People who genuinely liked him. And for the first time, I saw what had been behind all those walls he had built. A guy who was just scared to let people in. Sometimes, the biggest change comes from within. But not everyone gets the chance to start over, especially when things spiral out of control too fast. Story number 5. The trade school teacher and the terrifying moment. I never thought I'd be genuinely scared for my life in a classroom. But that day, every single one of us in that workshop knew something was very wrong. Mr. Larson had always been a little off. Not in a creepy way, but in that unpredictable, walk on eggshells kind of way. He was our vocational shop teacher, old school, gruff. The kind of guy who believed real men don't complain. If you messed up a project, he'd bark at you like a drill sergeant. If you weren't paying attention, he'd smack the workbench with a wrench so loud it could stop your heart. But that day, that was something else entirely. It started small. He was muttering to himself more than usual, pacing the room while we worked on our projects. His hands were shaking, and his face was pale. A few of us exchanged glances. Something was off. Then, completely out of nowhere, he grabbed a wooden mallet from the tool rack and hurled it across the room. It smashed into the wall so hard that dust flew everywhere. The room went dead silent. Then, in a low, trembling voice, he mumbled something about them watching him. At this point, we were all frozen in our spots, trying to figure out if this was some kind of twisted lesson, or if we were in actual danger. Before anyone could react, he suddenly sprinted toward his workbench, grabbed a power saw, and turned it on. I swear to God, time stopped. We all jumped up, chairs scraping against the floor, ready to run. And then, before anyone could stop him, he brought the saw down onto his own hand. The scream that came out of him was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Someone shouted for help. Another kid ran for the door. I was frozen in place, watching as blood spurted onto the workbench. The school called an ambulance, and he was taken away. We never saw him again. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said he had been dealing with personal issues for years. Others whispered that he had been unwell for a long time, and no one did anything about it. But all I know is this. When I stepped into that workshop the next day, the first thing I saw was the dried stain on the workbench. And I knew I would never forget what happened in that room. Losing control is terrifying. But sometimes, it's not the teacher who's the threat, it's the students. Story number 6. The shocking schoolyard brawl. Narrated by Emily. High school drama is always messy. But this was next level. At my school, Savannah was the girl. You know the type, beautiful, confident, the kind of person who made everyone turn their heads when she walked down the hall. She had the perfect boyfriend, Jake, and an equally perfect best friend, Lauren. They were the golden trio, the kind you'd see in a high school movie. Until the truth came out. Someone had seen Jake and Lauren together. Not just hanging out, together. And of course, the rumors spread like wildfire. It didn't take long before Savannah found out, and she snapped. It was lunch break, and I was standing outside near the cafeteria when I saw her. Savannah was walking across the courtyard like a woman on a mission, fast, furious, and completely focused on one person, Lauren. Lauren was standing near the outdoor staircase, laughing at something someone said. She had no idea what was coming. 1 second, she was there, all smiles. The next, Savannah shoved her with full force. Time slowed down. Lauren's scream cut through the courtyard as she lost her footing. She tumbled hard down the concrete stairs, landing in a crumpled heap at the bottom. Everyone froze. Then came the chaos. People ran over. Teachers started yelling, and within minutes, someone had called the police. Lauren was lying there, clutching her arm, her face twisted in pain. Savannah? She just stood at the top of the stairs, breathing heavily, her hands clenched into fists. The cops arrived. Savannah was immediately pulled aside. Lauren was taken to the nurse's office, then the hospital. The next day, we found out she had a fractured wrist and a mild concussion. Savannah was suspended indefinitely. That day changed everything. She lost her boyfriend, obviously. She lost her best friend, for obvious reasons. And she lost the reputation she had worked so hard to build. One moment of rage cost her everything. Sometimes, school fights aren't about love. Sometimes, they're about mistakes that spiral out of control. Story number 7. The farewell party that almost turned into a crime. Graduation night was supposed to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. The music was blasting, everyone was laughing, and for the first time, we weren't just high school kids anymore. We were on the edge of something new. But for me, that night became unforgettable for a much darker reason. Samantha, my best friend, had been drinking a little too much. Okay, maybe a lot too much. She was giggling, swaying on her feet, barely forming sentences. I had just stepped away for a second to grab us some water when I turned around and saw something weird. Ethan was leading her away. Ethan was, well, Ethan. Quiet, friendly, never in trouble. But something about the way he was holding her up, how fast he was moving, made my stomach twist. I jogged over. Hey, where are you guys going? Ethan barely looked at me. She needs a ride. I'll take her home. That didn't sit right. Samantha was supposed to go with me. She's fine, I can. She's already in my car. He cut me off, his voice calm, but too calm. That's when the unease turned into full-blown alarm. I ran. I ran like hell. By the time I reached his car, he was already opening the passenger door. Samantha, barely conscious, mumbled, "Where's Sarah?" I grabbed the door handle. "She's not going anywhere with you." Ethan stiffened. "Sarah, don't be dramatic." I yanked the door open and froze. There, in the back seat, was a duffel bag. A duffel bag with duct tape, rope, a freaking blindfold. My body turned to ice. This wasn't just a ride home. I screamed for help. Kevin and a few others ran over. Ethan backed away, his hands up, stammering. "It's not what it looks like." But there was no explaining that bag away. The cops were called. Ethan didn't show up to graduation. He didn't message anyone. He just disappeared. Sometimes, monsters don't lurk in the dark. They walk among us, smiling, waiting for the right moment. And sometimes, the people we fear the least are the ones we should fear the most. Story number 8. The Church and Its Darkest Secret. Narrated by Laura. I grew up in a town where faith was everything. Everyone knew everyone, and Sunday mornings meant church, whether you liked it or not. And at the heart of it all was Principal Matthews, a man so well-respected, so trusted, that parents practically worshipped him. He ran our Christian school with a gentle but firm hand. He preached about morality, about kindness, about how God sees everything. Turns out, he didn't take his own sermons very seriously. One afternoon, I was waiting outside the office for my mom to pick me up. The school was quiet, almost empty. That's when I heard it, a voice inside the office, low, pleading. I froze. It was Emily, a freshman. She sounded upset. "Please, I don't think I..." Then his voice. "Principal Matthews, you're special, Emily. This is between us." My stomach twisted. I didn't know what was happening exactly, but every instinct in me screamed that it was wrong. I peeked through the glass panel. Emily was standing there, rigid, her eyes wide with panic. And he, this man that everyone adored, was standing too close. I didn't think. I just acted. I shoved the door open, and everything froze. He turned to me, his face darkening. Emily's eyes darted to mine, silently begging for help. Mom's here," I blurted. "She's looking for Emily." Silence. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile. A calculated one. He stepped back. Of course. Emily was just leaving. Emily ran past me. I followed her, neither of us looking back. The aftermath. A week later, Emily's dad found messages, disgusting, undeniable messages. The truth exploded. Matthews was arrested. Parents were outraged. But in court, he barely got a slap on the wrist. Community service. A joke of a punishment. I remember Emily crying after the trial. It's like he still won. Sometimes, justice doesn't win. And that's the scariest part of all. Not just individuals, but entire systems can hide shadows no one wants to see. Story number 9. The Scandals of a Small Town School. Narrated by Kevin. I grew up in a town so small that everyone knew everyone. Our school had just around 400 students, ranging from kindergarten to high school seniors. And for the most part, things were quiet. Or at least, that's what we thought. Turns out, behind the seemingly peaceful walls of our little school, some pretty insane things were happening. It started with the school nurse. She was well-liked, always had a kind smile, and handed out ice packs like candy. That is, until it was discovered that she had been stealing prescription medications meant for students with chronic illnesses. Some parents had suspected something was off, but no one expected the truth to be that bad. She was fired immediately, but the damage had already been done. Then there was the band teacher. To everyone's shock and horror, he was accused of inappropriate behavior toward an 8th grade student. Whispers spread through the halls, but the school administration was disturbingly quiet. Eventually, the truth came out, and he was arrested. Even now, I still get chills thinking about how many of us had trusted him. But the worst scandal? Our swim coach. Everyone knew he had a bit of a drinking problem, but no one thought it was serious, until he drove drunk one night and hit someone. The victim didn't survive. The entire town was shaken. He was arrested, and obviously, he never stepped foot in our school again. Just when we thought things couldn't get any crazier, the FBI showed up. Apparently, a middle school student had used his mom's computer to post threats against the president on Facebook. It was meant to be a joke, but the authorities weren't laughing. They tracked him down to our tiny school, and suddenly, we had federal agents roaming the halls. Looking back, I don't know how so much chaos managed to fit into such a small school. You'd think with only a few hundred students, we'd be a quiet, forgotten town. But I guess some places are proof that no matter how small a school is, there will always be secrets lurking in the hallways. But not every scandal gets the closure it deserves. Story number 10. The classroom disaster that still haunts me. Narrated by Adam. You ever have one of those moments in life where you just know that you will never, ever live it down? Yeah, this was mine. My name's Adam, and when I was in 8th grade, I became a legend, but not in a good way. It all started in the middle of math class, right after lunch. That day, my stomach had been feeling a little off, but I figured I could tough it out until the bell rang. Big mistake. About 15 minutes in, I felt a shift in my gut. A dangerous, gurgling shift. I knew I had to get to the bathroom, fast. I raised my hand, trying to keep my voice steady. Ms. Reynolds, can I go to the bathroom? She barely glanced up from her textbook. Class is almost over, Adam. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Lady, I was fighting for my life. I tried to focus, breathe, distract myself. Anything to keep what was brewing inside me from escaping. But the stomach cramps got worse, and suddenly, I felt a wave of heat rush over me. I was sweating, my hands gripping the desk like I was holding onto the last shreds of dignity I had left. Then it happened. A deep, ominous rumble sounded from my stomach, and before I could even react, disaster struck. It wasn't silent. It wasn't subtle. And it sure as hell wasn't contained. The class went dead silent. Then, a second later, chaos. People were gagging. Desks were screeching as students scrambled to the other side of the room. My best friend, Kevin, looked at me like I had personally betrayed him. Even Ms. Reynolds, the unshakable Ms. Reynolds, slapped a hand over her mouth and bolted for the door. The classroom had to be evacuated. I, Adam, was officially the kid who caused a classroom-wide evacuation. Not because of a fire drill, not because of a gas leak, but because I was the gas leak. Even years later, my high school friends still bring it up. I could be making a speech at my wedding, and someone in the audience will probably whisper my middle school nickname, Methane Adam. And that's how one bad lunch turned into my legacy. Sometimes, disasters come from the smallest things you never expect. Story number 11. The bomb scare that shut down my school. Narrated by Kevin. You know those days in school when everything is too quiet? The kind of quiet that makes you feel like something crazy is about to happen? Well, for us, that day turned into absolute chaos. My name's Kevin, and when I was in elementary school, my school had a full-on lockdown. Not for a drill, not for a fight, but because of what looked like a freaking bomb. It started with this kid, Ryan. He was the type of kid who always had some random junk in his backpack. Half of it he probably found in his dad's garage. That morning, he walked into class, casually pulled out this weird-looking pipe with metal caps on both ends, and went, "Hey, Miss Carter, do you know what this is?" Miss Carter barely looked at it before her face went completely pale. She froze, then stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. Within seconds, she rushed out of the room, leaving a bunch of confused second graders behind. 5 minutes later, the fire alarm blared. At first, we thought it was just a drill. But then, instead of being led outside in an orderly fashion, we were told to stay in the classroom. The principal's voice came over the PA system, shaky and serious. "Teachers, this is a lockdown. Please follow emergency protocol immediately." That's when we really started freaking out. Kids were whispering, some were crying, and our teacher kept looking at the door like she was expecting it to explode at any second. Turns out, Ms. Carter had run straight to the office and told them Ryan might have brought a bomb to school. Next thing we knew, the police showed up. And not just any police. There were squad cars, a SWAT team, and even the bomb squad. The whole school was evacuated while Ryan was questioned. I swear, the poor kid looked like he was about to pass out from sheer panic. After almost an hour of total chaos, the bomb squad finally gave the all-clear. The bomb? Yeah, it was literally just a piece of PVC pipe. Ryan's dad had used it for plumbing, and Ryan thought it looked cool, so he took it to school. The best part? The teachers never let Ryan live it down. Every time there was a safety drill, they'd joke, "Okay, Ryan, You're not bringing anything interesting today, right? False alarms can cause chaos, but sometimes a prank that seems harmless can lead to unexpected consequences. Story number 12. The toy gun prank that went horribly wrong. Narrated by Ryan. You ever have one of those moments where you realize instantly that you've made a massive mistake? Yeah, this was one of those times. I'm Ryan, and when I was in middle school, my friends and I accidentally got our school swarmed by a freaking SWAT team over a toy gun. It started on a normal morning at the bus stop. My friend Jake was kicking around some loose gravel when he suddenly stopped and pointed at something near the bushes. "Dude, check it out," he said, pulling out what looked like a real handgun. Now, we were just a bunch of dumb kids, and in our heads, this was the coolest thing ever. We passed it around, pretending to be action heroes, aiming it at trees, at lampposts, just messing around. At one point, Jake even pointed it at a car driving by and did the whole pew-pew sound effect. Bad move. A few minutes later, as we were walking into school, we noticed something weird. There were sirens in the distance. Then, out of nowhere, our principal's panicked voice came over the PA system. "Attention, students and staff. We are now in full lockdown." This is not a drill. We were rushed into classrooms, doors locked, lights off. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Nobody knew what was going on, but everyone was scared. Then, outside the window, we saw them, police officers, shields up, rifles drawn, surrounding the school. That's when it hit me. Oh, my God. This was because of us. 15 minutes later, the SWAT team stormed in, and a few officers pulled me, Jake, and two others aside. They sat us down in an empty room and started grilling us. "Where did you get the weapon? What were your intentions? Do you understand the seriousness of this?" I swear, I was about to pass out. Jake, practically in tears, managed to stammer out, "It was just a toy. We found it. We didn't mean to scare anyone." Eventually, they checked the gun. Yep, plastic. The officers looked beyond frustrated. The lockdown was lifted, but our parents were called immediately. Let's just say my mom was not thrilled to get a call from the police first thing in the morning. We didn't get arrested, but we were suspended for a week. The principal gave an assembly about responsible behavior the next day. And Jake, well, his mom grounded him for 3 months straight. Lesson learned. Never, ever mess around with something that looks like a weapon. Even if it's fake, the consequences are 100% real. From a school-wide panic to a real-life horror story, sometimes teachers themselves barely escape the worst. Story number 13. My teacher escaped a serial killer by pure luck. It was a typical Monday morning in my English class. The students were half asleep, lazily flipping through their books when one of them suddenly asked, "Miss Carter, have you ever had a truly terrifying experience?" I paused for a moment, then set my book down. "Are you sure you want to hear this? Because once I tell you, you might never look at me the same way again." Their curiosity was hooked, so I took a deep breath and began. When I was about your age, I had a habit of walking home alone from school. It wasn't far, just a few blocks, but one evening, something felt off. I remember the streetlights flickering, the air heavy with the scent of rain about to fall. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a car slowing down behind me. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then, the driver pulled over, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and he started walking in my direction. I told myself not to panic, to keep walking at a steady pace. But then I heard his footsteps quicken. My heart pounded in my chest. My house was only a few doors down, but I knew if I ran too soon, I might not make it inside before he caught up. So I waited until the very last second, until I was just a few feet from my front steps. Then I bolted. I didn't look back. I fumbled with my keys, threw the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, locking it immediately. I peeked through the curtains. The man was standing on the sidewalk, staring at my house. After a few moments, he turned and walked away. I never told my parents. I never told anyone. I convinced myself that maybe it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe I had overreacted. Years later, I was watching the news when I saw a mugshot that made my blood run cold. It was him, the same man. He had been arrested for multiple murders. And the worst part? The timeline matched. He had been in my town, targeting young women, the very same year I had my close call. The classroom was dead silent. One of my students finally broke the tension, whispering, "Ms. Carter, that's the scariest thing I've ever heard." I glanced around the room, meeting their eyes. That's why I always say, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. It might just save your life. Escaping danger by pure luck is terrifying enough, but sometimes the real horror is hidden right beneath your feet. Story number 14. The Secret Tunnel Under the School, narrated by Samantha. If you went to my high school and never heard about the tunnel, you were either living under a rock or the most well-behaved student ever. I'm Samantha, and back when I was a sophomore, my friends and I discovered something insane, a forgotten maintenance tunnel running underneath the school. It was cramped, dark, and probably full of spiders, but to a bunch of bored teenagers, it was perfect. We turned it into our own little hideout, sneaking in between classes, leaving behind stupid graffiti, and daring each other to crawl deeper into the darkness. It was all fun and games, until the day Jason got stuck. Jason was that kid, the one always pushing boundaries, taking dares way too seriously. One afternoon, he decided to squeeze through a collapsed section of the tunnel no one else dared to go near. The second he got through, we heard a muffled, guys, followed by the worst sound imaginable, shifting rocks. He was trapped. Panic set in immediately. We tried pulling him out, but every time we moved the debris, more dust and dirt rained down. Jason started freaking out, and honestly, so did we. We had no choice but to call for help. Within minutes, the whole school knew. The fire department showed up, teachers were yelling, and we all watched as they literally had to dig Jason out. When he was finally free, covered in dirt, and looking half dead, the principal just stared at us like we were the dumbest kids alive. The tunnel was sealed off the very next day. No more secret hideout. No more legend. But if some secrets lie hidden beneath the school, others lurk right in the teacher's lounge, and they're far more scandalous. Story number 15. The School Counselor's Dark Secret, narrated by Thomas. Looking back, I still can't believe how long it took for the truth to come out. My name's Thomas, and when I was in high school, we had a counselor, Mr. Whitaker. On paper, he was everything a school wanted in a staff member: friendly, involved, always willing to lend an ear. But there was something off about him. I wasn't the only one who noticed. He was too friendly, always lingering a little too long after school, showing too much interest in certain students. I saw the way he gravitated toward younger kids, the way he conveniently ignored personal space. And when I warned my friends to stay away, they laughed. Then the rumors started. Whispers about students being called into his office for counseling sessions that lasted way too long. Someone claimed he once gave a girl a ride home, even though school policy strictly forbade it. But when I brought it up to a teacher, they shut me down immediately. Thomas, you can't spread baseless accusations like that. Mr. Whitaker has been a respected member of this school for years. I got detention for spreading false rumors. My parents were furious, not at the school, but at me. The message was clear: shut up and move on. I did. Until my sophomore year of college, when I saw his mugshot on the news. Arrested for possession of explicit content involving minors. The police found a hard drive full of it, including photos of students from our school. The school district suddenly went into full damage control mode, pretending they had no idea about his behavior. But they knew. We all knew. And the worst part? Not a single teacher or administrator who had defended him ever admitted they were wrong. Not every scandal is about a single teacher. Sometimes, an entire school's leadership is hiding something even worse. Story number 16. The Athletic Director's Scandal, narrated by Mark. You ever have one of those moments when a rumor turns out to be way worse than you thought? Yeah, this was one of those. My name's Mark, and back when I was in high school, our athletic director, Coach Daniels, was the guy. Charismatic, well-liked, always cracking jokes with the football team. He acted like a cool older brother more than a school administrator. That's probably why no one batted an eye when he spent extra time mentoring certain students. Then the whispers started. It began with one girl, senior, 18, part of the volleyball team. People noticed how much time she spent in his office, how she'd get rides home from him after practice. But when someone confronted her about it, she just rolled her eyes and said, "You guys are making something out of nothing." Except it was something. A few months later, an anonymous tip got the school involved. An investigation was launched, which basically meant they slapped his wrist and told him to be more careful. Nothing happened to him. She graduated. Life went on until someone dug deeper. Turns out, Coach Daniels wasn't just involved with students, he was also involved with the school's finances. Over the years, he had been quietly siphoning money from the Athletic Boosters Fund. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars just gone. One day, we showed up to school, and he was gone. No farewell speech, no explanation, just an empty office. The school gave some vague statement about personal matters, but everyone knew what happened. The money was missing, the relationship rumors weren't just rumors, and the guy had bolted before anyone could officially take him down. Did they ever track him down? No idea. All I know is, when the truth came out, none of us were really surprised. But the scandals didn't stop there, because schools always have secrets that leave everyone speechless. Story number 17. Unbelievable incidents in the schoolyard. Narrated by Jessica. Schools are supposed to be a place for learning, right? Well, my high school felt more like a live-action soap opera. And somehow, I always ended up in the middle of the drama. My name's Jessica, and I swear, the stuff that happened at my school could have made headlines. But two incidents, in particular, took things to another level. The first one, our history teacher, Mr. Reynolds. He was old school, strict, and had that grumpy grandpa vibe. No one really liked him, but no one ever expected this. One day, during lunch, the school suddenly went into panic mode. Teachers whispering, the principal looking like he was about to pass out, and then boom, Mr. Reynolds was gone. Just like that. Turns out, someone walked in on him in the staff bathroom with a student. And not in a helping her with her homework kind of way. The news spread like wildfire. Some kids swore they always knew he was creepy. Others refused to believe it. Either way, he never came back. The school tried to keep it quiet. But, good luck keeping secrets in a building full of teenagers. And then, just when we thought things couldn't get weirder, it did. A few weeks later, a sophomore girl got caught doing, well, something she really shouldn't have been doing to herself. Right in the middle of the schoolyard, during lunch, with people around. At first, I thought my friend was messing with me. No way would someone actually, in broad daylight. But when I saw the video, because, of course, someone had recorded it, I almost choked on my soda. There she was, in the middle of the schoolyard, looking like she was starring in her own personal educational film. And the worst part? The teachers had no clue how to handle it. They just stood there, probably questioning their career choices. She earned herself a nickname that day, and trust me, it was not flattering. By the time senior year rolled around, we had so many scandals that these incidents became just another part of the chaos. But even now, whenever someone brings up craziest things that happened in high school, these two stories always make the list. And sometimes, the weirdest things don't happen in the schoolyard, but right in the middle of the classroom. Story number 18, the most regrettable moment of his life. Narrated by Dylan. High school is full of embarrassing moments. But this one was legendary. My name's Dylan, and I was there the day it happened. The day an unfortunate soul made the worst mistake of his teenage years. Right in our very own classroom. Let's call him Jonathan. Jonathan wasn't a troublemaker or a class clown. Just your average guy who mostly kept to himself. But that day, he went down in history for all the wrong reasons. It was after school, and most of us were just chilling in the hallways, waiting for our extracurriculars to start. A couple of us had left our books in class, so we headed back to grab them. As we approached the door, something caught our eye. Jonathan was still inside, alone, at his desk. At first, we didn't think much of it, until we noticed the movement. Now, to be fair, if he had picked literally any other location, he might have gotten away with it. But no, Jonathan had chosen a classroom that had a full-length glass window facing the hallway. We froze. One of my friends stifled a gasp. Another turned away, so fast he almost tripped. But the worst part? Our history teacher, Mr. Roberts, had walked up behind us, wondering why we were standing there looking horrified. He followed our gaze. Silence. Then, a single cough from Mr. Roberts. Loud. Deliberate. Enough to cut through the tension like a knife. Jonathan looked up. We locked eyes, and that's when it hit him. His face drained of all color. His hands. Yeah, they disappeared from sight real quick. He scrambled, fumbling with his belt like his life depended on it, which, in a way, it kinda did. But the damage was done. The door swung open, and Jonathan walked out, head down, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The hallway was dead silent. Not a single word was spoken. The next day, he was gone. Rumor had it his parents pulled him out immediately. No goodbyes. No last words. Just vanished. To this day, nobody dares mention his full name. But if you bring up the incident in hushed tones, you'll see people exchange knowing glances, because everyone remembers Jonathan. And I bet he never forgets to check for windows ever again. But one story isn't just about embarrassment. It's about injustice that no one should have to endure. Story number 19. When a school exploited a tragedy for PR. High school can be brutal, but for some people, it's more than just mean words and bad grades. For some, it becomes too much to bear. My name is Lily, And I will never forget what happened to Claire. Claire wasn't my best friend, but we had a few classes together. She was quiet, always kept to herself, and no matter how much she tried to fade into the background, the bullies never let her. They picked at everything: her clothes, her grades, her family situation. Even the teachers weren't much help. Some turned a blind eye, while others seemed to think tough love was the solution. Then one day, she was just gone. It hit the school like a shockwave. Some people cried, others whispered in hushed tones, but the most common reaction? Guilt. Even those who barely knew her felt it. The heavy, suffocating what if hanging in the air. And that's when the school decided to act. They announced a mandatory assembly on mental health. At first, it sounded like the right thing to do: an open conversation, a moment of reflection, maybe even an apology from the administration for not stepping in sooner. But that's not what happened. Instead, we got a PR campaign. The principal took the stage with a somber face, delivering a rehearsed speech about how much the school cared for its students. Then came the slideshow: pictures of smiling students, upbeat music, clips of our school's latest achievements. They never once said Claire's name. The breaking point? A freaking merchandise stand set up right outside the gym, selling school-branded stress balls, t-shirts, and water bottles with the slogan, "Take care of yourself, represent our school with pride." That was it. The silence in that gym wasn't from grief anymore. It was from pure, seething rage. Over the next month, students transferred out by the hundreds. Parents pulled their kids, teachers quit, and the school's reputation crumbled. Not because of what happened to Claire, but because of the administration's cold, calculated attempt to capitalize on her tragedy. No one ever said it outright, but we all knew the truth. Claire's story was never about raising awareness. It was about protecting the school's image. And finally, a scandal hidden within the library walls would shake the school to its core. Story number 20, The Scandal in the Library. Narrated by Sarah. I wasn't supposed to be in the library that late. It was after school hours, and I had stopped by to pick up a book I had forgotten earlier. The place was almost empty, just me, the librarian, and a couple of students finishing up homework in the far corner. Or so I thought. As I walked past one of the secluded reading areas, I heard whispering. At first, I ignored it. Students gossip all the time. But then I heard something else, a giggle, a very flirty giggle. That's when I noticed them. A girl from my class, Emma, was standing way too close to Mr. Dawson, our history teacher. At first, I thought I had misread the situation. Maybe she was asking for help on an assignment? But then I saw it, his hand sliding down her back, resting somewhere it absolutely shouldn't be. I didn't even think. I gasped loud, the kind of sound you make when your brain just short circuits. Both of them turned toward me, eyes wide. For a moment, it was dead silent. And then I screamed. I wish I could say I did it on purpose, that I wanted to alert someone. But honestly, it was just pure shock. And that scream? It carried. Within seconds, footsteps thundered down the hallway. A couple of students rushed in, and before anyone could process what was happening, they saw it too. Emma yanked herself away from Mr. Dawson like she had been burned, but it was too late. The next day, the entire school was buzzing. But instead of outrage, instead of people demanding justice, they turned on Emma. They called her desperate, said she was leading him on. Some even accused her of making the whole thing up. She must have wanted it. She was probably exaggerating. The teachers barely addressed it. Mr. Dawson was quietly placed on leave while the school investigated. But Emma? She couldn't walk through the hallways without whispers trailing behind her. Her friends stopped sitting with her at lunch. The stares, the judgment, it was relentless. She lasted 2 weeks. Then she transferred. Just like that, she was gone. And Mr. Dawson? He disappeared too. No charges. No official statement. Nothing. But a year later, I saw him again, teaching at another school. Smiling. Like nothing ever happened. School isn't just about books, exams, and boring lectures. Sometimes, it's the setting for stories so wild, so shocking, that they stick with you long after graduation. From jaw-dropping scandals and fights that shook entire campuses to moments that left students and teachers utterly speechless, these incidents prove that reality is often stranger than fiction. But now, it's your turn. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a school incident that left you in complete shock? Maybe a secret that finally came to light, a fight that escalated beyond control, or a moment that no one could ever forget? Drop your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Reddit True Vault for more insane true stories. Thanks for watching. and see you in the next one.